right, good afternoon, everyone, and apologies for the delay. We're about 48 hours from the horrible events of Tuesday's tragedy. While we know a little bit more than yesterday, one thing remains abundantly clear. But for the immediate actions of the Jersey City Police Department and the leadership of Chief Michael Kelly, the outcome would have been far, far worse. We continue to follow all investigative leads in partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey, the FBI, the ATF, New Jersey State Police, and other law enforcement agencies. As I said yesterday, we are committed to providing the public with information that is properly vetted and thoroughly accurate. We will get you that information as quickly as we can, but we think it's more important to be right than to be fast. And in providing information, we are balancing three factors: the interests of the public, especially those who want to know whether their communities have been targeted; the interests of the families involved so that they can privately mourn the loss of their loved ones; and the interests of the investigation so as not to compromise our ongoing inquiries. As the state's chief law enforcement officer, and all of us as prosecutors, as investigators, we simply don't have the luxury to jump to conclusions. That's why we will continue to work through the evidence in a methodical and in a deliberate manner. But here's what we can confirm. Law enforcement has recovered 5 firearms to date that are linked to the 2 deceased suspects, David Anderson and Francine Graham. 4 of them were recovered inside the Jersey City kosher supermarket, and 1 was recovered inside the U-Haul van parked out front. Inside the store, we recovered an AR-15 style weapon, which we believe David Anderson was firing as he entered the supermarket. We recovered a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun, which we believe Francine Graham was carrying as she entered the supermarket. We also recovered a 9mm Ruger semi-automatic firearm and a 9mm Glock 17. Inside the U-Haul, we recovered a .22 caliber Ruger Mark IV with a homemade silencer and a homemade device to catch the shell casings. Using serial numbers found on the firearms, we were able to trace 2 of the weapons to date to the source of purchase. We believe that 2 of these firearms, the Mossberg shotgun and the .22 caliber Ruger Mark IV, were purchased by Miss Graham at separate gun shops in Ohio in the spring of 2018. We also have recovered several hundred shell casings at the scene. We are processing all of this evidence as we speak. Now, as I said yesterday, 3 civilians were killed inside the kosher supermarket. We believe at this time that all 3 were shot by the suspects within minutes of the shooters entering the store. We know that a 4th civilian fled from the scene, with the suspects shooting at him as he ran across the street. We also know that within minutes of the suspects taking control of the store, Anderson and Graham began firing at law enforcement officers who responded on foot and by patrol car. At this point, our evidence indicates that the shooters were aiming their fire at law enforcement officers only, and not at others on the street. The 6 individuals who died on Tuesday were all transferred to our state's Northern Regional Medical Examiner's Office, which operates under the auspices of the Office of the Chief State Medical Examiner. 5 of the autopsies were completed yesterday, and 1 is happening today. We're not going to provide any details regarding the preliminary findings of the medical examiner, but I will say this: 2 of the deceased civilians were members of the Orthodox Jewish faith, and thanks to the hard work of our medical examiner's office, we were able to complete the autopsies and release the bodies promptly to ensure their burials in keeping with the victims' religious traditions. In addition, we were able to ensure that a rabbi was present at their medical examinations. We continue to gather evidence regarding the motives of the shooters. We have identified a number of social media accounts that we believe were used by the suspects and purport to espouse certain viewpoints. We are currently working to determine the authenticity of these accounts and to gather other evidence that we can use to corroborate these views. But based on what we have collected so far, however, including based on recent witness interviews, we believe that the suspects held views that reflected hatred of the Jewish people, as well as a hatred of law enforcement. We are still working to determine how they selected their particular targets for these attacks, specifically both the JC Kosher Supermarket and Detective Joseph Seals. There has been considerable reporting that these two suspects are linked to the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. We have evidence that both suspects expressed interest in this group, but we have not definitively established any formal links to that organization or to any other group. Based on the available evidence, we believe that the two shooters were acting on their own, but we will continue to pursue all leads. So let me be plain at this point. The evidence points towards acts of hate. I can confirm that we're investigating this matter as potential acts of domestic terrorism, fueled both by anti-Semitism and anti-law enforcement beliefs. Now, last night, a number of us attended a memorial at Temple Beth El in Jersey City, as well as a funeral services for Ms. Ferenz, who was shot inside the supermarket. All of us here today will continue to be present in the days and in the weeks and in the months ahead. We are all grieving, but none more so than the families of the victims. Through the Victim Services Office of our Division of Criminal Justice, we are in contact with those families, and we will continue to provide whatever support we can. And in at least one case, we are making arrangements to pay for the funeral expenses of the victim. We remain in regular contact with faith organizations across the state. And the reason for part of the delay this morning was that all of us just got off the phone with our state's Interfaith Advisory Council, where we briefed them on the facts that we are sharing with you now. The state and our federal partners are committed to ensuring the safety of all religious communities in the state and all houses of worship in this state. So if any resident or religious leader has an immediate concern, they should call 911 or their local law enforcement agencies. For other resources, religious groups can contact the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, led by Director Jared Maples, who's here with us today. He can speak to our ongoing efforts to ensure the security of houses of worship and to keep our religious communities abreast of the latest threat information. Also present with us is Rachel Wainer-Apter, the director of our Division on Civil Rights, which investigates acts of bias across the state. Rachel and her team stand ready to investigate any complaints regarding bias incidents in this state, and to ensure that all residents of this state feel safe in their homes, schools, and communities. They stand ready to take reports of bias incidents at 800-277-BIAS, 800-277-BIAS. And in addition to that, we're working with our law enforcement brothers and sisters in New Jersey and in Jersey City as they grieve a fallen colleague. We need to support our law enforcement officers, and we need to remember the extraordinary sacrifices that they make for us each and every day. And as some of you know, earlier this year, we launched a first-in-the-nation statewide resiliency program for our law enforcement officers, designed to help them deal with the stresses of modern policing, which now includes responding to acts of bias and hate and terrorism, like the ones that transpired here in Jersey City. We've deployed peer-to-peer counselors to Jersey City through our Cop-to-Cop program, and mental health professionals are available 24/7 to any law enforcement officer who needs them. Now begins the more tedious process of reviewing ballistic evidence and electronic evidence. We're continuing to follow up on all leads, and we'll return to brief the media when we have more to report. I want to now ask the U.S. Attorney for the state of New Jersey, Craig Carpenito, to come up and provide his insights.
Thank you, General. Once again, I want to start first and foremost by sending my heartfelt condolences to the families of these victims. As I said yesterday, and I continue to believe, it's no way for the families and loved ones of victims of a crime like this to learn about things by leaks through the media, incremental information, and the unfortunate way that information was getting out initially. I appreciate those of the media who had patience with us and allowed us the time we needed to get the information we needed to be able to give you our classification. At this point, I agree with Attorney General Grewal that this is going to be investigated going forward, with the FBI taking the lead with the U.S. Attorney's Office as a domestic terrorist event with a hate crime bent. The motivations appear to clearly be a bias towards both the Jewish community and law enforcement. You can see clearly from the video that the individuals that engaged, the cowards that took down those innocent victims, engaged only the folks in that store and in the law enforcement community. You could see people walking by. They didn't engage anyone. They were clearly targeting that store. They were clearly targeting the Jersey City Police Department. Okay, we don't know why, and that's where we are now. Now we're at the stage of the investigation where we try to piece together everything we can from social media, from ballistic evidence, from whatever we can learn about these individuals to determine why it was that particular store, which is something we don't know at this point in time, those particular individuals, and what the inflection point was for the incident. But what I can tell you is we're going to put all the resources necessary into getting to the bottom of it as best we can. Okay? I don't really think there's much to add to it at this point. Sorry, you have a question?
Anything further on the suspects as they relate to the Bayonne livery cab driver who was murdered?
As we said yesterday, they are suspects in that investigation. We're going to work jointly to determine whether or not there's any relationship between the incident in Bayonne and the incident in the store, other than the fact that the suspects are the same.
We'll hold questions till the end. We'll hold questions till the end.
Hi again, I'm Gregory Erie, the Special Agent in charge of the Newark's FBI Field Office. To talk about what the AG and the U.S. Attorney said, first and foremost, our thoughts again are with the victims and their survivors of this incident, senseless incident. Everything you see from the people before you, all our efforts are to bring them some measure of justice along with their communities. The FBI will continue to investigate this as a domestic terrorism incident with a hate crime bias slant to it. We are pressing forward in collaboration with our local, state, and federal partners to, again, try to understand the why behind this. I ask your patience as we go forward. We are now, as the Attorney General mentioned, in the phase where it's very forensically linked, where we need to go through every piece of evidence very, very intricately to make sure we understand everything we're looking at. We have not identified any co-conspirators. We believe they acted alone, but we will continue to monitor for any threat to any community, and if we come across one, we'll immediately inform both them and the media of what to be aware of. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to the Hudson County prosecutor to share a few remarks. And I would just add, I spoke about the resources from Homeland Security and Preparedness. The sheriff is here, Frank Scolari, and he also provides a tremendous number of resources to local houses of worship and is another point of contact for the local community to reach out to at this difficult time if they need assistance at their facilities. So with that, Esther.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jersey City is our home, and I want to ensure the entire Jersey City community that law enforcement believes that this heinous event is over and that the individuals that are responsible are now deceased. Although the threat is over, law enforcement remains vigilant and will continue to take the necessary steps to keep our community safe. All of our partners in law enforcement, all local, county, state, and federal agencies continually work together to provide security when and where it is needed. However, it's not enough to just rely on law enforcement. We are partners, and you, the public, are part of the partnership. If anyone with any religious affiliation feels the need for additional safety measures in a particular area, please reach out to your police department. The General has also given you some information. You are free to choose. We will try to accommodate as best we can with the local police departments, as we have been doing. And I thank Chief Kelly for that, and I thank also Sheriff Scolari for doing that as well. As Governor Murphy said yesterday, always remember that if you see something, say something immediately. We've also begun the process of reaching out to many of our community civic, educational, and governmental partners in Jersey City, including members of the Jewish community, as well as the African American community. This outreach effort is something that we do every week throughout the year in order to build positive relationships. But after a violent attack like this one, our outreach effort will now focus on opening a dialogue in order to foster a better understanding of what our community needs in the aftermath of the shooting and an understanding of what steps law enforcement can and will provide. Thank you. Sharon, questions for the general?
And I'm going to ask Director Maples to also share a few comments.
I'll be brief. First and foremost, as everyone has talked about, there is no threat that we're aware of that is specific or credible as it relates to this incident or any other throughout the state of New Jersey. And we will continue to work with our state and local and federal partners to ensure that side by side as we have throughout every minute of this incident. The second thing I wanted to highlight is the interfaith piece. For all of our interfaith partners, all of our resources are available at njhomelandsecurity.gov. It's www.njhomelandsecurity.gov. There's an interfaith tab, as the governor mentioned yesterday, and all of our resources from grant availability, both federal and state, suspicious activity reporting, the See Something, Say Something campaign. One piece to note on that is all in New Jersey, we are different. All of our leads and suspicious activity come through our office, the Counterterrorism Watch Office, which is co-located with the New Jersey State Police at the Regional Operations Intelligence Center, the ROC, which is our state's fusion center, and that's through federal, state, and local. And people can report to that through 1-866-4-SAFE-NJ, or by emailing tips@njohsp.gov, or by dialing 911. And per the Attorney General directive from last year, those reports will automatically go into the system and again be coordinated federal, state, and local. Thank you.
All right, questions?
General, you keep saying that this could have been much worse if not for the heroics of the officers involved. Have you uncovered any evidence that would suggest there was a broader plot or additional targets or other intended targets?
So let me say this. What we know at this point is that they had a tremendous amount of firepower, that they had a pipe bomb in the van, and but for the actions of Chief Kelly and his officers, they could have done more. And they contained the situation, and they brought it to an end within several hours, but without that damage expanding from the location where these two individuals were attacked.
Were they possibly looking at other locations?
I can't speak to that right now.
General, was the pipe bomb in the
Brian, go ahead.
If you could follow up on what you just said, what was asked, I would like, if you could, Chief Kelly and you, to address specifically the actions of Sergeant Jordan as she was pulling away what looked like a wounded officer or an officer down that we saw in the video. What we know about what she was doing, her actions, and your analysis of her actions, please?
So our investigation as to what transpired and what the officers did, as you've mentioned, the specific conduct of the officers is ongoing, so I'm not going to comment on that at this point, other than to say the actions of all the officers who responded were truly heroic, to include the officers who were the first on the scene, who called it in, to include the officers who arrived in the armored vehicle, and to include the officers who continued to process and secure the scene, and to include the officers who showed up the next day after they lost a colleague and had others injured in such a horrific manner, and went out to protect this community as they do each and every day with that grief that they carried with them from the day before.
General, you mentioned 5 firearms were
Detective
recovered.
Seals was targeted. Is it not that he saw the man and approached it? Do you have evidence that he might have been selected?
As I said yesterday, that part of the investigation is ongoing to determine why Detective Seals was killed by these two suspects and why this particular grocery store was selected by these two suspects. And as the U.S. Attorney said, as the special agent in charge said, that's going to take time because we're going through the digital evidence and doing that forensic research right now to see what the motivations were truly.
Accurately
Go ahead.
identified the van and approached it?
Go ahead.
Were there other materials recovered from the van? You mentioned one firearm and the pipe bomb. Were there other materials that could be used as a weapon recovered from that U-Haul van?
No other weapons, but I will say this, that the weapon was outfitted with ballistic panels, and the pipe bomb was in the van, and the weapon with the silencer was recovered from the van.
It's been reported that there was also a handwritten note in the van. Can you speak to the contents of that note?
I'm not going to speak to the contents of that note because it's part of our ongoing investigation. Just one more in the back. Go ahead.
They have a manifesto. You said that you're going to the social media accounts. Have you seen anything that suggests that?
I think the manifesto is a word that the media is using. We have not discovered anything that we would characterize as a manifesto at this point, and our investigation is ongoing with respect to the documentary evidence that was recovered and with respect to the electronic media that we're going to be searching in the near future. So that
We're good.
we'll end it
We're
with
good.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
You meant the van.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. The van was outfitted with ballistic panels.
All right, thank you, everybody. Again, if you have questions, feel free to grab me on your way out or call Peter in the office. I'll take.
See.